Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of True Crime with Caitlyn. Today we're going to be talking about a case which involves two men where evil runs through their veins. Habitual offenders who both separately committed murder, then when they were released from prison and given a second chance at freedom, they would go on to repeat their heinous actions. This is the murder of Quyen Ngoc Nguyen. Before we jump into the case, I just want to give a little pre-warning that my pronunciation for some of the names involved in this case might be a little bit off. I have tried my best to research on how they are properly pronounced, so please be assured that I have tried my best to pronounce all of the names inside of this video correctly. And with that being said, let's jump into today's case. Quyen was born in Vietnam on the 1st of September 1988, and she was born into a very happy, loving family and by all accounts had a very regular early life. Everyone who knew Quyen loved her because she had such a warm heart and she was so kind. Her sister, Quyen, would say that Quyen was a bit naive or maybe even just very gullible. If her friends were having a joke on with her or were having a laugh about something, which is something that friends always do, she would believe every single word that they were saying. Quyen would become a mother of two. She had a son and a daughter who she absolutely doted on. She was an exceptional, devoted, very loving mother. I couldn't pinpoint exactly when she had her children, but she would eventually become a single mother of two. Quyen wanted more than what she believed Vietnam would be able to offer her, and so she made the decision, along with her sister, to up and move to the UK in 2010. She believed that moving to the UK would present her with more opportunities, it would be a better way of life for her two children, and it would be a safe place for them to live. In preparation for their move, Quyen actually taught herself how to speak English, which I understand from other people is actually a very hard language to learn if it's not your first language, and she was so smart that Quyen was able to teach herself the language. Quyen was so excited to move to the UK, and something that she had dreamed of, something she was so excited to do, was to play in the snow with her children. When she arrived to the UK and snowfall eventually came, she was so happy to experience this. Quyen attended the University of London where she studied business and she would go on to graduate. Quyen and Quyen would eventually move right up north, living in Killingworth, North Tyneside. The sisters lived together with both of their families, so that was Quyen and her children, along with Quyen and her husband and then their children. So a very busy house. The sisters also owned and ran a nail salon, which they both worked very long hours in, and alongside this, Quyen was also a landlord. She would rent out properties in low-income areas at a cheaper rate, helping people and families who were living in poverty or people who were unable to get housing through other landlords or even the council. Quyen wanted to be able to help others. She was just kind-natured like that, and so this was part of the reason that she done this. She wasn't like one of these scummy landlords though, who you have mold and they don't care, or your boiler's broken and you've got to nag at them to fix it. She wanted her tenants to be happy and comfortable living in their home, so she always kept up on repairs and stuff like that. This is how she would be introduced to Stephen Unwin. Stephen ran his own maintenance business where he would do handiwork and odd jobs for landlords. Unbeknownst to Quyen and probably a lot of Stephen's clientele, he was a career criminal and had already served a life sentence for murder. From a very young age, Stephen Unwin began a pattern of crime and getting into trouble with the police. In March 1992, when he was 14 or 15-year-old, he was convicted of theft of a motor vehicle along with arson after setting a HGV on fire. Later in 1992, he would break into the house of a 72-year-old man who was asleep upstairs. Stephen ransacked the house and then he stole this man's benefit book. Then Stephen set 5 5 separate fires inside of the house and fled, leaving this 72-year-old man alone to be engulfed by the flames. Thankfully, a neighbour had noticed that his house was burning and contacted emergency services, who were able to safely get him out of the house in time. He had been badly affected by smoke and gas inhalation, but he got out alive. Over the years, Stephen's crimes would escalate and he would become more and more dangerous. It began with theft, but nothing that would directly harm another person. He then moved up to arson, then again escalated to breaking and entering into a home to burgle it, and then setting alight in order to cover his tracks, which is something that would have directly harmed the person inside. But on Christmas Day in 1998, Stephen would again escalate and take his crime one step further, committing his first murder. 21-year-old Stephen broke into the bungalow of a man named John Greenwell in the early hours of Christmas morning. John was a 73-year-old retired pharmacist who was incredibly ill with terminal cancer. John was asleep in bed when Stephen broke into the bungalow. He then made his way to John's bedroom and began to bludgeon him with a heavy camera before ultimately stabbing him in the chest, which killed him. Stephen then used a wheelie bin to transport a stolen TV from John's back to his own house where he was living with his mother, which was literally just along the street, not even a 10-minute walk away. Stephen then made his way back to John's bungalow, installed a video recorder before setting 3 fires throughout the bungalow and leaving. Setting fires to incinerate evidence has almost become a signature for Stephen now. As he was walking back along the street heading back home, 2 patrol officers who were out and about, who likely recognised and knew Stephen, noticed him walking, clutching this video recorder. They stopped him and questioned him about it, and Stephen managed to convince them that it was his video recorder, and so they wished him a Merry Christmas and let him get on his way. Mere moments later, however, these 2 same officers would notice thick black smoke filling the sky in the distance. They called for the fire brigade, who promptly arrived to John's bungalow, and here they found his charred remains still lay in his bed. Stephen was quickly arrested and at Newcastle Crown Court pled guilty to John Greenwell's murder. He would be sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 12 years to serve. While serving at HMP Swaleside on the Isle of Shippey, Stephen would share a cell with a man who was also incarcerated for murder named William McFall, and the 2 would become very close friends. William John McFall was an Irishman originating from Green Island, which is northeast of Belfast. An old neighbour of William would later talk about him, and they described him as, quote, troubled and always in trouble. He was someone to be avoided and to be incredibly aware of. From being a teenager, William showed many traits that we see in many evil psychopathic killers, one of these being animal abuse. A friend of William's was breeding mice for a local pet shop when the 2 of them got into an argument and fell out. Instead of confronting his friend and sorting it out like civilized people, he decided he was going to take his anger out on the defenseless mice. Using scissors, William beheaded 40 mice one by one, then lined up their headless bodies on his old friend's doorstep. This is clearly someone who has no regards towards life. Over the years, he would tally up several convictions for things including robbery, possessing firearms and offensive weapons, and also arson. On the 5th of May 1996, William arrived at the home of 86-year-old Martha Gilmore with intentions to burgle her house. For some reason, he believed that Martha had a small fortune stashed underneath her bed, and he wanted it. He rang the doorbell to see if anyone was home. If there wasn't, the burglary would be tons easier. After waiting a couple of minutes and no one arriving at the door, William broke inside. However, he wasn't met with an empty house. Martha had mobility issues and she didn't get anywhere fast, and she relied on a walking stick to move around. She was making her way to the door to answer it when William broke in. He panicked because he knew that Martha knew who he was. She would recognize him, she'd be able to name him and identify him to the police, and he wasn't going to let that happen. William struck Martha with so much force that she fell to the floor. Then, using a hammer he brought, he whacked Martha in the head at least 3 times, which killed her. He then dragged her lifeless body through the hall of her home so that he could get back out of the door and make his escape. Martha's body would be found the following day, lay in a pool of her own blood. It didn't take the police long to discover that William McFall was her killer. He had actually left a full palm print on the inside of her door. After being arrested, he would plead guilty to murder at Belfast Crown Court in April 1997, and he smirked as he was given a life sentence. Stephen Unwin and William McFall became really good friends while they were cellmates at HMP Swaleside. William would be released on a life licence in October 2010 after serving about 14 years. Being on life licence means that his release from prison is conditional. He has to follow a strict set of rules, and this included him having to regularly see a probation worker, and he must not re-offend. He can be recalled to prison for any little thing at any time. Stephen would also be released on a life licence 2 years later in December of 2012. He had also served approximately 14 years. After his release, Stephen went on to live with his new girlfriend, a woman named Rachel Edmondson. Stephen and Rachel had known each other way back when they were a lot younger. They had briefly dated in '94 when they were teenagers, however that relationship just fizzled out. She was reintroduced to him through a friend while he was still incarcerated for the murder. Initially, Rachel had no idea why he was in prison, but just that he was. One day, the couple were speaking on the phone when Stephen put all of his cards on the table and told Rachel that he was behind bars because he had murdered someone. But he didn't tell her the whole truth. He told Rachel a twisted version of what actually happened, claiming that John had came at him with a knife and that the murder was a retaliation. It was done in self-defense. Even though this didn't explain why Stephen was in John's house at stupid o'clock in the morning on Christmas Day, but regardless, Rachel believed him. She had been manipulated by him. Manipulation was something that Stephen was very good at, and he would continue to do this over the course of their relationship. Stephen claimed that he was a rehabilitated man to Rachel, that he had turned his life around and he was ready to start fresh, that he planned to really use the skills he had learned in prison to set up his own business, which he did actually do. When he was released, I think initially he sort of stuck to his word. He would attend his probation meetings, he had set up the handyman business, and he expressed to Rachel that he wanted to start a family. When speaking about him later, Rachel recalled that Stephen said he had missed some of the best years of his life being incarcerated, and that he didn't want the opportunity to become a father pass him by. So the couple would go on to have a daughter. However, their relationship didn't last. Rachel broke up with Stephen in May 2017 after they had been dating for about 5 years because she found out that he had been cheating on her. Now, I am going to rewind the timeline a little bit here. So Stephen and William got back in touch through social media in 2016. Stephen messaged William offering him to work alongside him for his maintenance business. Stephen mainly done joinery stuff, whatever that entails, I have no idea, whereas William would do painting and decorating. William accepted, and from here he spent most of his time living up north in a village named Shiny Row, which is near Sunderland, actually very close to me. However, he would sometimes go down to Blackpool and live there, so he sort of floated between the two. Along with Stephen's business, the men were essentially the ringleaders of a crime ring where they would obtain deadly weapons, including firearms. They grew and sold cannabis and so much more. All of the things that they should not be doing on a life license. They would take pictures and videos on their phones to show off their weapons and show off their cannabis farms, and when watching or listening to them, you can hear in their voices that they think this is great. Here is an audio clip from one of their videos.
Hello, Stewie, baby. Where you want to see my friends? You want to buy some Chinese Thai stick?
Lovely cheese! Real cheese! Ah!
After his release and breakup from Rachel, Stephen would be reported to the police at least 26 times, and I'm just going to take you through a couple of the reasons why. So on the 2nd of July 2017, a woman called the police after Stephen had threatened her, saying that he was going to smash her jaw in and that he and his cousins were going to take turns raping her. Now just imagine how terrifying that is, full stop, but then add on that Stephen is already a very well-known dangerous man. He is a convicted killer, and now he is threatening you when you know he is capable of such evil. While reporting this to the police, this woman expressed her worry and her terror about speaking out in case it caused any sort of retaliation from Stephen, and so because of this, she didn't take the report any further, which is heartbreaking because you should be able to have faith that the police are going to protect you. Another incident that was logged regarding Stephen was when he was spotted just casually walking around with a can full of petrol or diesel. Again, this is a man who was notorious for setting fires to cover up his crimes. During an argument with one of his neighbours, Stephen threatened them, saying that he was going to burn their house down, a threat that should have absolutely been taken seriously from someone who has literally tried to do this twice before. And just one more thing, another report was made against Stephen after he threatened to assault a teenager. Those are just a few examples out of 26 reports. From just those few points there, you can hear that he is not a rehabilitated man. He is still very aggressive and dangerous, not someone who is safe to be out and about in society, and someone who needs help regulating their anger at least. Despite all of the reports and incidents that were logged by the police, not a single one was reported to his probation officer like they were supposed to. His probation officer had no idea about any of these and guaranteed if they did, he would have been recalled back to prison. Saying that though, the probation services weren't doing what they were supposed to either. Rachel recalled Stephen attending a few meetings after his release, and that was it. There weren't many follow-ups after that, and not even one spot check was done. They were supposed to closely monitor Stephen, but clearly that wasn't happening, or else they would have intervened if they'd known that he was knocking about with another convicted killer, making disgusting threats and buying guns and selling drugs. So, these are the men that Quyen is involved with, people that she is given work to. I don't know if she ever actually met William because most of the communication would be done between Quyen and Stephen. It actually wouldn't be unusual for Stephen and Quyen to go together to different properties to look at them. When they first actually met, Stephen was showing her around a house in Sunderland, and that was in April 2017. So based off this, I don't think she was afraid of him or worried about him or had any problems being alone with Stephen. But again, she didn't know about his past or anything that he was involved in at that time. On the 14th of August 2017, shortly after 6:15 p.m, Quyen finishes work, gets into her black Audi A4 and makes the drive over to Stephen's house at 2 St Oswald's Terrace, Shiny Row. It takes her just over an hour to get there from the nail salon, and when she arrives, she stands at the back gate. She sends Stephen a text message telling him that she's there, and then she stands waiting for him. Quyen is under the ruse that she is here to either view this property or to go and view another property with Stephen. I don't know if she knew that this was his house. However, that wasn't why she was there. Stephen had arranged this false viewing with Quyen in order to lure her to his house. He wanted to act out on sick, sadistic sexual fantasies that he had. He wanted to rob her and then kill her. He and William had planned the entire thing. As Quen Noin was leaving work and on her way to the house, William texts Stephen to confirm their plan, asking him, quote, "Are we raping the blank?" He uses an awful slur that I'm not going to repeat. So this just proves that there was planning and premeditation. When Quyen arrives at the house just after 7:30 p.m, she stood waiting outside the gate for around about 2 minutes until Stephen emerges from the house. When he does, he sort of turns around and shoos something to get out of the way. He tells Quyen that he's talking to a dog, when in fact he's talking to William, shooing him away, signalling him to move out of the way and keep out of sight. Quyen walks with Stephen through the yard into the house. This was all caught on a CCTV camera, and this would be the final footage of Quyen alive. Immediately upon entering, Stephen and William pounced on Quyen, totally catching her off guard. They dragged her through the house and began to beat her while screaming at her, demanding that she give over her bank card and her PIN number. Quyen was a very petite woman. She stood at only 5 foot tall and was around 7 stone in weight, so she was no match to these two fully grown men who were towering over her. In hopes that it would stop the attack, she gives them what they wanted. She hands over her bank card and her PIN number, probably hoping that they would take it and just let her go, but they didn't. Over the next 4 hours, Quyen would be subjected to disturbing, degrading torture. She was badly beaten and throttled while she had a ligature tied around her neck. She would be raped by Stephen, and together the men used a toy lightsaber as part of sexually assaulting Quyen. A pistol or gun was also used at some point during all of this. When it was later found, it had her DNA on it, meaning it had touched her somehow. Potentially, she had been held at gunpoint or hit with it, or it was used as part of the sexual assault. Quyen would be injected with whiskey before being asphyxiated, either having a pillow put over her face or a carrier bag placed over her head. After enduring all of these horrific acts, Quyen lay limp on the floor. She was passed out, but still alive. Halfway through the assault, this was at around 9:45 p.m, Stephen left the house and went to a nearby co-op. He used the cash machine inside to withdraw money from Quyen's bank account before buying something and heading back to the house to continue the assault. I think that it was after Stephen returned back that Quyen was incapacitated. It's likely that Stephen wanted to check that she'd given them the right PIN number for her card before essentially knocking her out and going on to kill her. As Quyen laid passed out in critical condition on the floor nearby them, Stephen and William decided to whip up a quick curry and sat and ate together, not having a care in the world, for the woman lay on the floor clinging on to life. Shortly before midnight, Quyen's body would be wrapped up in a white dust sheet. Stephen carried Quyen over his shoulder out to her own Audi and laid her across the back seats. He and William then went back into the house to collect something, then went back out to the Audi, driving off. Stephen drove the car from his house to some allotments in the Philadelphia area. These two areas are very close. It wouldn't have even taken him 5 minutes, especially at that time of night. He drove the car down a desolate, secluded road, stepped out, and doused both Quyen and the car in petrol before setting it on fire, burning Quyen alive. She was still alive at this point. A pathologist would later say that she had taken a breath whilst she was burning. I honestly cannot imagine the terror that Quyen must have felt in those final hours of her life, being subjected to the torture, rape, sexual assault, and then physically being burnt alive. It is horrific and unthinkable to imagine that another human being is physically capable of doing this to someone else. After leaving Quyen to burn alive, Stephen and William quite casually just walked back home. They then jumped into Stephen's car and drove to a nearby hole in the wall to steal more money from Quyen's bank account. They had taken a total of around about $1,000 between both of the transactions. While in the car, William would whip out his phone and take a selfie, clearly looking happy and not distressed or under duress at all, while Stephen is looking out of the window. You will be able to find this image over on the Instagram at TrueCrimeCaitlyn if you want to go have a look at it, but those are the faces of two men who have just committed their second murder. Shortly before 1 a.m, the fire brigade would receive a report about a burning car. They promptly arrived at the scene and began extinguishing the fire. It was then, just before 1 a.m. on the 15th of August 2017, that the body of 28-year-old Quyen Nguyen was found. She had been engulfed by the flames and was almost cremated. Large parts of her skin just weren't there anymore. They had been consumed by the fire, and it was said that she was partially fused with the seats of her car. Within the car, firemen found Quyen's passport, which somehow hadn't been obliterated by the fire, so they had an idea of who this person was. However, it would be dental records that positively ID'd Quyen. Because of the damage to Quyen's body, a pathologist wasn't able to confirm her cause of death. However, he did say, quote, Likely the cause of death was consistent with the effects of fire. Meanwhile, back in Killingworth, Quyen, who again is Quen's sister, is frantic because Quen hasn't returned home. This was extremely out of character for our sister. She lived a very simple life where every day was mostly the same. She got up, she saw to her children, she went to work, cooked, cleaned, go to bed, ready to do it all over again the next day. So for her to go radio silent on her sister, not answering calls, not answering text messages, just not being in touch in general, was very alarming. Quyen had contacted some friends and acquaintances of Quen to see if anyone had any idea where her sister was, but with each phone call and text message, she got the same response. No one knew where Quen was. By midday on the 15th of August, Quyen could not wait any longer to see if Quen was going to show up, and so she reported her missing to the police. After this, she and her husband piled into the family car and just began driving around to see if they could spot Quen or her car anywhere. Unbeknownst to them, however, both Quen and her car had already been found. Police were very quickly able to determine who was responsible for Quen Nguyen's murder. Stephen and William had basically left police a trail which led directly back to them. They had been openly using her bank card in places that had CCTV showing them using her bank card, and the CCTV captured her going into Stephen Unwin's house but never going out. Using other CCTV, they were able to track her car, seeing that it was being driven by him to where it was dumped, and then it was set alight. It took not even 12 hours to get Stephen Unwin and William McFall into police custody under suspicion of murder, and as you could probably imagine, both of the men denied the death that they were involved and instead tried to pin the blame on the other one. Stephen told the police that he and Quyen were in a romantic relationship, and that's why she had gone to his house. Side note, Quyen denied that there was any sort of relationship between her sister and this man apart from a professional, working relationship. There was no romance there at all whatsoever, and no evidence to suggest that there was. Stephen continued, saying that he had gone out to buy some cigarettes. That's what he was buying on that CCTV in the co-op when he was using Quen's card, and that when he returned, he walked in on William with his hands around Quen's neck, and that she was lifeless. So according to him, everything had happened during that short trip to the co-op. William, on the other hand, had a less elaborate story. He claimed that he watched Stephen smother Quen with a pillow before going out to buy cigarettes. When he was arrested, Stephen was wearing a blue pair of swimming shorts which had low-level DNA belonging to Quen on them. Low-level DNA is also known as touch DNA, so in this case, it's possible that Quen had touched the shorts and that some of her skin cells had transferred onto them. His boxers, I believe, most of the sources refer to them as pants, but if he was arrested wearing swimming shorts, I gathered that in this instance, pants meant underwear, so the boxers that he was wearing when he was arrested had traces of Quen's blood on them, along with another DNA sample. Cargo shorts that William was wearing showed to have low-level DNA belonging to Quen on the inside of the shorts in the front centre area. Despite their twisted stories and terrible lies, both of the men would be charged with the murder of Quen Nguyen. Their trial was held at Newcastle Crown Court, where they both ended pleas of not guilty. The jury were told about both of the previous murders that Stephen and William had committed and the similarities to Quen's murder. Quen being someone who was unable to defend herself, monetary gain being partially the motive for the murder, and that fire was used to try and get rid of evidence. The jury was shown evidence retrieved from the men's phones, which included their criminal activity, possessing firearms, the cannabis farm, proof that they sold cannabis through text messages where they were discussing pricing. The evidence found on the phones also proved that they had planned to cause harm to Quen, exactly like that text message that William had sent confirming that they were going to rape her. After a long 4-week trial and 4 hours of deliberation, Stephen Unwin and William McFall were found guilty of the murder of Quen Nguyen. The judge commented to both men, saying, quote, "Stephen Unwin, you are a calculated, manipulative and ruthless killer. William John McFall, you are an extremely violent man, capable of monstrous behaviour. Upon hearing that, William didn't like it. He didn't like being called names, and he shouted back at the judge saying, "Well, that's just your opinion." Throughout the trial, William would have several outbursts like this. He profusely denied any involvement. He would shout, he would call the evidence bullshit, and he claimed that there was nothing against him. He would even later claim that he wasn't given a fair trial and that he was going to appeal this and take it to the highest court, and that the jury were all brainwashed. Stephen would also be found guilty of raping Quen. DNA belonging to him was found inside of her. On the 25th of April 2018, Stephen and William were both sentenced, and they each received whole life orders, meaning that they will never be released from prison. They will never get an opportunity or a taste of freedom for the rest of their natural lives. The last that I read about Stephen was that he was serving his time at HMP Franklin, which is a Category A prison in Durham, nicknamed Monster Mansion. From here, he has wrote several letters proclaiming his innocence, and I couldn't find where William was serving. Quen's death was devastating, heartbreaking, earth-shattering for her family. Quyen has done some interviews about the effects that her sister's murder has had on the family, which, as you can imagine, is devastating. In one of the interviews, she talks about how Quyen's son had once asked her if she could take him to heaven so that he could see his mum again. There won't be a new episode dropping next week, but if you still need your true crime podcast fix, make sure to go and check out the Bourne Investigation podcast, which is hosted by my lovely friend Charlie Bourne. She has many great, fascinating episodes over there, ready for you all to catch up on. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Don't forget to follow the podcast so that you never miss a new upload. You can also find photos and updates over on the Instagram at TrueCrimeCaitlyn. I appreciate you for being here, and I will catch you all on the next one.